Dude, I just finished playing this game called Child of Light. You should really play it. It's so good.
Yeah, okay, sure. Maybe I'll give it a whirl sometime.
Child of Light is on sale for the Steam Summer Sale. You should check it out.
Maybe next time.
Is it worth it?
WTF. How dare you ask me if one of my favorite games is worth free?
I'll definitely get it and play it now.
Are you ever gonna play Child of Light? I'm tired of waiting for you to
Fine! I'll do it myself! Yeet! I feel like it's pretty normal to have a friend that is always recommending something to you. This isn't exclusive to video games either. I'm sure we can all think of that friend every few months, or weeks, sometimes days, who will say, "Have you watched this show yet?" Or, "Dude, you really need to play this game." Or, "Dude, just read Chainsaw Man already." And for some reason, we just never get around to it. You don't mean to be a negligent jerk about it, just sometimes you never end up trying that piece of media. I know for me personally, I have a hard time not forming my own opinions about something before I try it, and it's something I've been trying to break free from a little bit more, but that's a topic for another video. Practically since the day we met, my buddy Peppermint Attitude has been recommending that I play the game Child of Light, which makes sense given the game released the same year we met, and at least once every year since then he has told me that I need to try Child of Light. Even while in the middle of editing this video, he sent this message.
Play Child of Light.
Ma'am.
Now that I think about it, I have been telling you to play this game for 5 years. I am officially mad at you. I gave you 5 years.
Bruh. How you gonna be mad at me over 6 years of friendship?
I know you will like the game, dude.
I just need more time.
Okay, I will give you until 2025, but that's it, huffy face emoji.
Enough is enough, and fortunately we're not waiting until 2025 for this. I finally acquired my own copy of Child of Light for the Switch and played the game through to the end. The following are my personal thoughts and a formal spoiler-free review of the game. Child of Light was developed by Ubisoft Montreal and published by Ubisoft and released in 2014. Before I started playing Child of Light, I had the preconceived notion that the game was actually a puzzle platformer. I had seen a few screenshots, and based on the art style and the 2D perspective, I just assumed it was a puzzle platformer. Oh, but I could not be more wrong. I don't know how I managed to do it, but somehow in 2020 I wound up playing an RPG twice. However, even though the game is a traditional JRPG, FRPG? CRPG? Whatever. A genre I'm not particularly a huge fan of, I was still very interested to play because it came so highly recommended from my friend, and because the game runs in the UbiArt framework engine. What sets the UbiArt framework engine apart from other game engines is that it was initially designed to work with vector-based graphics. I'm not a game designer, so I don't know all the technical mojo about how the engine really works, but the opportunity to use uncompressed 2D artwork presents a lot of cool opportunities for different art styles. While the engine was designed with vector capabilities, the limited number of games created in the UbiArt framework all have varying art styles that don't all use vector graphics. Child of Light is a prime example of this, not using vector graphics at all. As you may have guessed from the name UbiArt Framework, the design philosophy for the engine was to streamline the creative game design process for level designers and artists. There's a great GDC conference from 2014 where someone from Ubisoft talks about this relationship and demonstrates how the engine works while they were developing Rayman Legends. I definitely recommend taking a look, and I'll leave a link to it in my description. It's super cool to watch. So whether sculpting models from clay, making acrylic paintings, or pencil drawings, or even vector graphics, the engine was designed so that any form of artwork could be used in a 2D game. This is where Child of Light gets its watercolor aesthetic. In a behind-the-scenes feature at Ubisoft Montreal, the developers talk about the design process in which they were basically able to take the concept art for the game and directly scan it into the game itself. In most game design, concept art is done as a separate guideline or idea for developers to work towards, and so sometimes the original vision or impact of the concept art is lost in the final product. This is not the case with Child of Light, having the team's original concept art serve as the final look of the game, which creates a gorgeous final product. But the visuals of Child of Light don't exist just to be pretty. Child of Light is an homage to and heavily inspired by classical illustration and fairy tales. Everything from the look to the story and even the dialogue is presented in a pseudo-rhyme scheme inspired by works like Rime of the Ancient Mariner. The story of Child of Light centers on Aurora, the daughter of an Austrian king and queen. Aurora's father remarries after the queen mysteriously dies, and the relationship between Aurora and her father never really seems to be the same afterwards. On the night before Easter in 1895, Aurora seemingly dies, and her father, heartbroken, falls to bed ill and deeply depressed. But while this is happening, Aurora simultaneously awakes on an altar in the mysterious land of Lemuria, where she is greeted by the talking firefly Aniculus. Together, they wander through the foggy woods until they happen upon the sanctuary of the Lady of the Forest. The two free her, and the Lady of the Forest grants Aurora the power of the stars, giving her the ability to fly. She then tells Aurora that if she finds the moon and sun as well, she will have the power to free Lemuria from the curse of Umbra, the Queen of Darkness, and travel back home. This is where the game really takes off. As previously mentioned, Child of Light is a traditional turn-based RPG that makes up the majority of the gameplay. Aurora, with the power of her fairy wings, and Aniculus can freely explore the 2D map. Whenever Aurora comes into contact with an enemy, a battle will be triggered. From here, the player is presented with a variety of options for how they want to attack the enemy. Time plays a crucial mechanic in Child of Light. On the bottom of the screen, there is a timeline that shows the speeds of Aurora and her party members, and the enemies you are fighting. When your party member reaches the beginning of the cast phase, you can choose to perform a number of actions that all take different amounts of time for the action to play out. This changes the speed in which your character reaches the action phase of casting, and where an interesting strategic element comes into play. If an enemy is in the middle of the cast phase and one of your characters beats them to an attack, that enemy's attack is interrupted and they are sent back to the wait phase. However, the same thing can happen to you, the player, as well. If one of your characters is attacked while they are in the middle of the cast phase, they can also be interrupted and sent back to the wait phase. This creates an extra layer of strategy, as choosing when and which enemies to attack can help move the battle in your favor. Add in the fact that Aniculus can hover over enemies and use his powers to slow enemies down, and this creates an engaging battle system that goes beyond just cycling through lists of menus. You can also choose to switch between any of your party members to fill the 2 active slots in battle. Speaking of party members, you have a wide variety of colorful characters who all serve different roles in battle. Aurora, for example, is the only character who can use light elemental magic along with her sword, and is a fairly balanced character. Then you have the clown Rubella, who specializes in healing magic and has the ability to revive fallen party members. Other characters you meet along the way have various elemental magics, are tanks in physical combat, or even have magic to buff or nerf the speed for you and your enemies respectively to have more control over the battle timeline. Each character is unique and allows the player to tailor their battles and gameplay the way they want. Pair this with the fact that every character has their own specific skill tree that players can develop as characters level up, and it allows for an even deeper degree of gameplay customization. Outside of battle, Aurora and Aniculus can find treasure chests, solve clever little puzzles, and collect colorful orbs called wishes, which will heal party members and refill your magic and fairy points. Collecting these is eerily similar to collecting looms in Rayman Origins and Rayman Legends, which brought me out of the atmosphere at times, but that's mostly a personal aside. Along your travels, you'll meet new characters, complete side quests, and take down massive bosses to get Aurora back home. Those are the basic building blocks of Child of Light. I spent the last couple of weeks playing the game and have finally completed the main story, and these are my thoughts on the game. Child of Light is a joy to the senses. Watching the watercolor world and characters come to life is absolutely stunning, and the gorgeous world is only made more alive by the incredible score of Beatrice Martin. Aurora's theme, as played multiple times by the titular character on her flute, is one of the most hauntingly notable tunes, and has that same sort of memorable effect as the songs Link plays in Ocarina of Time. From somber piano music to epic orchestrated battle themes, Martin's music pairs really well with the watercolor visuals to help bring that children's storybook come-to-life feeling. And the game is wholeheartedly dedicated to that feeling, for better or for worse. The plot, while certainly not anything to write home about, fits perfectly and comfortably in the environment created. It is an oftentimes predictable but simultaneously nostalgic tale that fits right in line with your typical fairy tale bedtime story for children. But what I really appreciate is the traditional feeling of the story while also feeling modern and fresh. In stark contrast to something like a classic Disney princess movie, Aurora is a female protagonist who is very independent. Even her name, Aurora, is evocative of the movie Sleeping Beauty, wherein that Princess Aurora was asleep in the castle and had to wait until Prince Charming slayed the dragon to save her. This Aurora, on the other hand, is entirely reliant upon herself and her friends, who come from all different races and class statuses from the Kingdom of Lemuria. She doesn't start off very strong or brave, but she learns these skills as she progresses through her journey, growing up right in front of the player's eyes. Not only in her stats, but in the strengths of her character as well, which I really loved watching unfold. Where the story falls flat to me is in the dialogue and in the pacing. All of the dialogue spoken between characters is meant to rhyme, which lines up with the classic fairy tale idea and is a good concept on paper. However, the lines of dialogue usually lack any sort of rhythm or meter, causing the flow to feel clunky and abrupt at times. The only other thing that personally bothered me about Child of Light's presentation is how Aurora and a very small number of characters are specifically rendered in 3D, when 98% of everything else has the 2D watercolor aesthetic. I know this is a minor nitpicky detail, and I know that by having Aurora be 3D, it allows for her character model to move more and be more expressive in her movement, but there were just a few times where I would be under this spell of looking at the game, and then Aurora's model would just stick out a bit oddly. Another thing I really love about Child of Light is, surprisingly, its battle system. Despite my previously alluded distaste for turn-based combat, the time mechanics and how the player can use Igniculus adds an extra dimension to the battle system. It's for a lot of the same reasons why I like the Mario and Luigi RPGs. Just that little extra layer of interactivity helps the gameplay feel more involved than just endlessly going through menus battle after battle. In a lot of ways, I think Child of Light is the perfect introductory JRPG for someone who has never played one before. The combat is deep enough for people familiar with the genre, but it's also simple enough and introduces the player to a lot of basic concepts like elemental weaknesses that just feel seamless. Even moving around the overworld is perfect for beginners. Aurora's ability to fly replicates the movement of an old-school top-down RPG, but with the added benefit of the overworld only existing on a 2D plane, simplifying navigation. I finished the game at just a little over 10 hours, which was honestly the perfect length. While there are some other games, like Trauma Center Second Opinion, that you wish just would never end, Child of Light's story wrapped up right around the time when I was starting to feel a little burned out off the combat. In closing, I think Child of Light is a wonderful little gem of a game. I may be 6 years behind in playing it, but I believe that it's a title that every gamer should try at least once. While subjectively, I would still say it's not exactly a game for me, as in it's normally the type of game that I wouldn't normally play based on the premise and genre, and I wouldn't rate it as one of my all-time favorite games. Objectively, I can recognize how special the game is, and why my friend was so eager for me to play the game. It's a game I probably won't revisit, and I don't feel any need to play the New Game Plus mode, which just basically has you replay the game with harder enemies, retaining your stats from your previous playthrough. But it's a game I'm still really glad that I tried and finished, and if you're like me and don't really like JRPGs that much, I still recommend giving Child of Light a go. It was a memorable game, and if the rumblings about a sequel are true, I'd definitely be interested in checking it out. Its visuals delight, its music draws you in, and its lovable characters leave a lasting impression upon players. So now, it's finally my turn to take up the torch, and I get to ask you the question. Have you played Child of Light yet? Thank you so much for watching and for checking out my video. In addition to you, the viewer, I'd also like to thank my good friend Goooooman, who always does a great job with the artwork I use in my videos. Also, you might have noticed that my channel banner artwork has changed recently. That's thanks to my lovely girlfriend who did this amazing drawing. And finally, I want to thank Peppermint Attitude for recommending I try something a little outside of my comfort zone. Let me know your thoughts about Child of Light in the comments down below. Have you ever played it? I'm curious, if you haven't played it for the past 6 years like myself, what's holding you back? Anyway, that's all from me. Thank you again so much for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.